Hi everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to look at SQL model. So I'm going to head over to the website for SQL model. So SQL model is a tool that allows us to work with SQL databases. In this case, we're going to look at how to use it with FastAPI. So the beauty with SQL model is that it helps us do both our validation as well as creating our database models. So instead of using SQLAlchemy, instead of writing a separate SQLAlchemy model, we can instead write one model that can act as our SQL model as well as our validation model or our serializer in this case. So SQL model is built of Pydantic, which helps us to validate our data, and it's also built on top of SQLAlchemy. So basically, it helps you to work with this, to work both functionalities while writing only one schema, just like we're going to see in this video. So let's go ahead and look at how to create a simple REST API with FastAPI and SQL model. So I'm going to go to Visual Studio Code. And within Visual Studio Code right now, we see that I already have a folder I've opened up. So I'm just going to pull up my terminal. So I'm using Git bash, but feel free because the commands are going to be the same across CMD or Mac. What I'm going to do in this case is to come, and what I'm going to do is to first create a virtual environment. So I'm going to say Python -m. So what I'm doing is I'm running venv, which is going to create a virtual environment as a command. So I'm just going to run venv, then I'm going to call our virtual environment env. So our virtual environment has now been created. So the first thing I'm going to do is to install FastAPI. We're going to go ahead and say pip, actually activating the virtual environment first with source env. It's going to be env scripts, then activate. So after activating the virtual environment, I'm going to install FastAPI. So I'll do pip install FastAPI. This is going to install FastAPI. Now, after installing FastAPI, the next thing I'm going to do is to create our main.py file where I'm going to write the code, most of the code for our video. So I'm going to create this file. I'm going to call main.py. And within main.py, the first thing is going to be to create our app instance. So I'm going to import the FastAPI from FastAPI. I'm going to say from FastAPI to import FastAPI. And then the next thing is going to be to create an instance of FastAPI. So to create this instance, I'm going to say app. It's going to be app. It's going to be to our FastAPI instance. It's going to be FastAPI. And after doing this, I'm going to create the various routes that you're going to use for our CRUD functionality. So to do that, I'm going to create so we're going to just be building a simple API that is going to be a simple book API, simply carrying out different CRUD functionalities of our database we've created. So I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to use SQLite, but feel free to carry on. The functionality will be the same for any other SQL database. So I'm going to go ahead and create our first route. So the first route I'm going to create is going to be at app route. Then this is going to be slash. So this is going to be slash books. So basically it's going to help us to return all books. So this is going to be an async view function. So I'm going to say async def, and then we shall get all books. So right here, what I'll just do is to pass. So I'm going to copy and paste this. I'll just change a few things. Actually, forgot to add the methods, but I'm going to add them. So instead of saying app.route, what I'm going to do is to specify that this is going to be app.get. And then right here, what I'll do is to say app.post, since this is going to help us to create a book. So I also change the name of this function and call it create book. And then another thing I'm going to do is to paste it. So this is going to be app.get. So in this case, what we want to do is to get a book by its ID. So then I'll specify we need a book ID. So right here we need a book ID, and since we're using type hinting, I can also specify that our book ID is going to be an integer. So when I pass that, I can come and as well create one for updating. So instead of saying app.route, I'll say app.put. Then instead of saying books, I'll say slash book. then I'll put in the book ID. So we are required to pass in our book ID. So I'll do the same thing just like for our get method. So in this case, I'll say we need a book ID, which is an integer. So I'll do the same thing for the route I'm supposed to delete. So I'll say app dot delete, and then right here we shall specify our route to be a book. Then this is going to be slash book slash it's going to be slash book ID. So right after that, I'll create the async view function. So it's going to be async, it's going to be book. So shall delete a book. That book is going to have a book ID, which is going to be an integer. So just right after doing that, I'll pass. After passing, now the next thing is going to be to implement our routes. So what I'm going to do is to actually come and install uvicorn. So I'm going to install uvicorn by saying, so I'm going to say pip install uvicorn. This is going to install uvicorn within our virtual environment. Now, after installing uvicorn, the next thing I'm going to do is to try to run and see the various routes we've created. So I'm going to run our server uvicorn. So I'll say uvicorn, then the name of the module in which our main app instance, which is this one, is. So in this case, we shall say main, then app, then we shall specify the reload function in the reload option, since we want to reload our server every time we are to save our changes. So when I run this, our server is going to run at port 8000. So if I headed over to my browser and went over to localhost 8000, so in this case it's going to be localhost 8000. So if you want to see a clearer definition of our API, I can go to slash docs because it provides us with the Swagger UI. So right here we have the various routes that we're going to implement. So currently they are not doing anything. So let's go ahead and set up our database. Now we're going to be using SQLModel to generate our validation schema as well as our book schema of the database. So to do this, I'm going to come right in here. I'm going to come to our code and then create a new file. I'm going to call this file models.py. So this models.py file is going to have both our validation and our database model. So when using SQL model, you don't really need to create separate schemas for your database as well as for your validation. So you need only one schema. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to import from SQL model. So we haven't yet installed this. So let me go ahead and install it. Installing SQL model is as simple as saying pip install SQL model. So this is going to install SQL model within our virtual environment. So just like you can see right here, we have it depends on both Pydantic as well as SQLAlchemy. So right after installing that, I'm going to come to SQL model and I'm going to import the following. I'm going to import SQL model class. So this class is going to be responsible for helping us to create our database models. So right after creating our database model, the thing I'm going to do right now is to come and create a class. So this class is going to help us to both validate as well as to create a table in the database. So this is going to be a class of books, since we're going to deal with books. Then this class is going to inherit from SQL model class. So call this SQL model. Now we shall also specify one really important parameter of which is going to be helping us to use this as both our SQL model as well as our validation schema. So I'll specify that table is going to be equal to true. Now after doing this, I'm going to kind of describe the various fields that we shall need for our table. We need to specify that we need an ID. So an ID is going to be an integer. Now remember, when you're sending a request, we shall not need to send this as an integer. For example, when we are creating a resource of, let's say, a book item in this case. So what we shall need is optional. So I'm going to import optional from typing. So I'll go ahead and say from typing, I'm going to import optional. And now what I'm going to do is say that the ID in this case will be an optional. Let me specify the data type of that optional. So in this case, this means that even if we don't specify our ID, it will be assigned to every resource that we shall be creating in the database. What I'll do here is to say that this is going to be a field. So we can also add some extra fields. For example, if I want to specify whether this is going to be a primary key or not, I can add it. I can add a field attribute and then be able to describe whatever attributes that field has. So also going to import field SQL model. After importing field, I'll come and say going to be field. So I can pass in literally everything that we want inside here. So right now I can say that the default in this case is going to be none, which means that we do not require an ID, or if we don't provide it, the default will be none. So after that, I'm going to also specify that this is going to be our primary key for our table. So set primary key to true. And after setting primary key to true, then I'm going to give each book a title, which is going to be a string. So I can also do the same thing and say field max length this, or field max length that. So I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to call that route. So what I'll just do is to say it's going to be a string, and then the description is also going to be a string. So after that, we have our book model created. So this book model is going to be helping us to both validate as well as to create our database. So let's go ahead and create our database. So I'm going to save. So now we have our database model as well as our serializer. I'm going to come right here and create a new file, which I'm going to call database.py. Now within database, we are going to create the specific configurations for our database. So remember, SQLAlchemy provides us with a create engine function that helps us to create our our database, or describe the where we're going to create our database. So we can actually set the connection string as well as other attributes such as echo to show SQL statements generated on a certain transaction, and something else. So what I'm going to do in this case is to import. So I'm going to say from SQL model. I'm going to simply come and import. So I'll come and import. I'm going to import session. So we can import session. I'm also going to import SQL model. So I'm going to import SQL model. I'm going to import create engine. So create engine function. And then I'm going to go ahead and then configure our database. So to do that, what I'm going to come and do is say I'm going to create a variable called engine. This will be created be create engine. So this will be create engine. And right in here, what I'll do is to specify the connection string. So since I'm going to use SQLite, I'm going to use OS to point to where our database is going to be. So I'm just going to come right here and import OS. I'm going to import OS. After importing OS, I'm going to get the best directory in which we are. So I'm going to create a variable called best directory. So this is best dar. Going to be equal to the DAN name of where we are right now, the root folder, the root project. So right here, I can say os.path.dan name. This is going to be DAN name, and then os.path. So I can right now look for the real path of the file we are currently editing, which is database.py. So what I can do is to say os.real path. So this will be a real path, and then I pass in the file we are actually editing, which is file. So this is database.py. So this means that it's going to basically give us, so if let me say I printed print star except, so when I come and say print, it's going to be Python, and I'll run database.py. So right in here we see, actually we see could not pass this from string. So let's try to see here. So I'm going to first remove this create engine function and try to run this. So right now we can see that it's pointing to where we are, to where our project is. So what I want is to join this to our connection string. So we need to go ahead and create our connection string. Our connection string is going to be a variable. So I'm going to call it create connection string, and then it's going to be, since we are using SQLite, I'm going to say SQLite and then class, then I'm going to concatenate it to os dot add dot join, and then right here, if I'm going to concatenate it to our base directory, as well as the name of the database that we may want to create. So in this case, I'm going to call it books.db. Right after doing this, I am going to save, and let's say we're going to print our connection string. So let's say we print our connection string. So I'll come and say print connection string. So once I run this again, we are going to notice the following. So if I run this, you see that it's going to give us the path to where our database is going to be in case we create it. So after doing this, I'm just going to come and provide this connection string within our create engine function. So I'm going to uncomment this. The create engine function takes in a lot of things, but the most important ones we're going to use are connection string or the connection URI. So I'm going to add the connection string. So I'm going to add the connection string. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to add the echo statement. So the echo statement, just like I said, helps us to be able to see the various SQL statements that happen each time we carry out a transaction or each time we query our database. So right now, I can say echo is going to be true. And once I do that, I'm going to simply save. So to create our database, we are going to need to map our model onto our SQLite database. So to do that, we are going to use going to create a new file here, which I'm going to create database.py. Within create database.py, this is where I'm going to write the commands that are going to create our database. So I'm going to come and say from I'm going to install from SQLModel. I'm going to import the following. I'm going to import the SQLModel class, and then I'm going to also import I'm going to import the SQLModel class, and then I'm going to import the model that we need to map onto our database. So this is going to be from models. I'm going to import the book model. So after importing the book model, I'm going to go ahead and create this model on our database. So I also need to import our engine. So I'm going to say from database, I'm going to import our engine. So right now we have what we need. So what I'll do is to just print creating database. So it's just going to be creating database, and then I'll just come right in here, and what I'll do is to say SQL. So SQL model, then I'm going to access the metadata, and then we shall access the create all function, and then we're going to bind this to our engine. So we're going to bind this to our engine. So what the statement means, it means that we're going to create a database using our model, and we shall use the database that we specified within our engine variable. So after doing this, I'm going to save. So let's try to create our database. I'm going to come to the terminal and run Python. This is going to be create db.py. So this is going to create our database within our directory, just like you see here. And right now, you can even see the various SQL that's generated when creating our database. So let's go ahead and then carry out our routes that are going to help us to work with our database. So right now we've created our table. So I'm going to explore our database. I have a tool called DB Browser for SQLite that can help you to be able to explore your SQLite database. If I open our database, I'm going to head over to the desktop where we have our folder. So it's inside SQL module. And if I open books.db, right now we see that we have an ID, a title, and a description, which means that our table has been created. So let's go ahead and make use of our schema to be able to carry out the various CRUD functionalities on our books. Let's go and do our code. So I'm going to head over to main.py, and I'm going to import the following. So I'm going to import from models. I'm going to import our model, which is going to be once we're going to import, so I'm going to say from database, I'm going to also import our engine. And then the next thing I'm going to also import is the session. So remember, we have these sessions. These sessions help us to add and update and do whatever things we may want to our database. We're going to import from SQL model. We're going to import I'm going to import is that I'm going to import the session class. So I'm going to import the session class in this case. So the first thing I'm going to do is to make well, the first thing I'm going to do is actually create a session instance and I bind it to our engine. So to do that, I'm going to come and create a variable called session, and the session is going to be equal to session a session object, and then what we shall do is to bind this to our engine. So basically we are binding this session to our engine, which means that we shall be able to carry out the various transactions on our database. So after doing this, I'm going to go ahead, and the first thing I'm going to do is to basically return a list of books. I'm going to close this first, and our server is running. Let me run our server. So now our server is running, so I'm going to close this. So let's go ahead and implement our route that's going to get our books. So what I'm going to do is to come right here, and the first thing I'm going to do is to be able to fetch a list of books from our database. So to do that, SQL model works in a way that it helps you to be able to generate a statement and then execute that statement using the session you're currently. So to do that, what I'm going to do is to create a variable called statement. So this statement basically explains the SQL that you're going to use to get books. So statement is going to be equal to, so I'm going to import a certain method or certain function that's going to help us to be able to select or read from our database. So I'm going to go ahead and import this. So I'm going to say import select. Then right here, I'll say that our statement is going to be select. And we're going to select, then we specify the model or that entity we're going to select. So in this case, we want to select from the book table. Then we can actually be able to get results. So I'm going to say that the results in this case is going to be our statement. So right here is where we can actually be able to get a query set, all the various things we may need. So in this case, we want to get all of the results. So what I'll do is to say we want to get all. So after doing this, I'm going to come and simply return our statement. So to do this, I'm going to say return results. So we can also specify the response model. So we want to return a list of results. So I'm going to use the list from typing to be able to do that. I'm going to come right here at the top, and then I say from typing, we are going to import, this is going to be optional. So right after importing that, I'm just going to come and specify that we need a response model to be equal to. So in this case, what we're going to do is to say that we need our response model to be a list. So let's try to also specify our status code. So I'm going to specify our status code. What I'm going to say is status. In this case, status code is going to be equal to. So I'm going to import status from FastAPI. I'm going to come right here. Actually, let me just do it up here. So I'm going to say from FastAPI, I'm going to import status, and then I'm going to come right here and say, sorry for that. So I'm going to come and say status dot. So I'll specify the status code that we need. In this case, I'll say HTTP. This will be 200. So sorry for that. 200. Then okay. So basically, after getting our books, what we need is a status code of 200. So I'm going to add a comma to present these syntax errors. I'm going to save. I'm hoping our server is running. I'm going to go. So right here, we see that list is not defined. Actually, I imported optional. Sorry for that. So I'm going to import list. This is going to be list. I save. Now our server is running. So I'm going to head over to our Insomnia. So I opened up Insomnia, which is my testing client. However, you may use whatever tool you may want. I'm going to create a new request. So I'm going to call this get all books. It's going to be a get request. We're going to create it. Then we're going to go to our localhost 8000 slash. So when I send this, we have an internal server error. So let's see. So right now we see select of scalar has no object. Also, let's try to fix this. So when I come here, I have select book. So right here I can actually say dot all. So actually let's try to see. So this is selecting, then we shall select the entity which is going to be our book. Actually what we failed here is to execute this. So right here what I'll do is to come and say our results are going to be an execution of the statement that we have here. So I'm going to come and say session dot. So we're going to basically make use of the execute function, and then we shall pass in the statement. So then, hoping that everything is fine, when I save, our server is going to reload. I head over to my insomnia, and when I make this request, still have an error. So valid is not a valid list. So let's try to see. So remove our this. So basically right here we have execute statement. Actually we are not going to remove our response model, but we can come and say dot all. So when I say dot all and save, as server is going to reload, and when I send this, we see that now it's returning an empty list of books since we don't have any books. So let's go ahead and also implement a route that's going to help us to select one book from our database. So I'm going to head over to our code in main.py. I'm going to head over to this route that helps us to get one book. So this is actually going to be get a book by the ID. So the first thing I'm going to do is to specify our statement. So our statement going to be equal to. So right here, what I'm going to do is to say that we need to get a book. So I'm going to select and I pass in the entity as our book. Then it provides us with where function that helps us to specify which attribute we are actually looking for. So in this case, what I'll do is to say where, then I'll pass in the attribute. So in this case, the attribute is going to be book ID. So I can say book ID is equal to. So we are searching for a book that has the ID as a book ID. So then I'll pass in the book ID. So this is going to be book ID. And after doing this, I'm going to execute this. So what I'll do is to come and say result is going to be a session dot execute, and then we shall pass in our statement. So after doing this, I'm going to actually specify that we need the first search an ID. So and come and say book dot first, or what we can actually do is to say book dot one. Then if we don't have one, so basically it has a lot of methods. So we can say book dot one, so it's going to return one book, or we can even have book dot one or none, which searches for the book, and if it doesn't exist, assigns it a none object. So what I'll do is to actually use book first. And after that, what I'll do is to search. If this book doesn't exist, we should want to throw an exception of 404. What I'll do is to say if result. So what I'm going to say if result is none or is equal to none. So what I'll do is none. Then I want to raise an exception. So the beauty with FastAPI is that it helps us and provides us with these exceptions. What I'm going to do is to come to FastAPI. Then what I'll do is say from FastAPI, I'm going to say from first API dot exceptions. So I'm going to say exceptions. We are going to import HTTP. This is actually going to be HTTP exception. So after importing HTTP exception, if we see that the result that we are searching for does not exist, we want to throw a 404 not found error. So what I'll do is to say raise. So I'll raise an HTTP exception. Now the first thing we have to specify is the status code. So I'm going to say is status code going to be so in this case I can specify status dot HTTP. So this is going to be 404 not found. So we need to actually, so right now what happens if we search for the result and it doesn't exist, we're going to throw this error. If it exists, what we need to do is to just return the result. So what I'm going to do is to specify that our model is going to be, our response model is going to be the book model. So I'll come right in here and say our response model is going to be equal to then after doing that, what I'll do is to actually return the result. So what I'll do is to say return result. So I'm going to save this. Our server is still running. So yeah, it's still running. So when I head over to our insomnia and I'm going to create a new request. So this is going to be a get a book. And then I'm going to create this request. So I'm going to go to localhost 8000 slash book. Then I provide the book ID as one. So let's try to see. So when I send this, you now see that value is not a valid integer. So let's try to actually see. So the value that we actually passed in here wasn't a valid integer, and that's why we've got this error. So I'm going to remove this. So when I send this, now see that our resource is not found. So basically our status has not, our book has not been found, and that's why we're seeing this error. You can also go ahead and work on a route that's going to help us to create a book. So you need to go to Visual Studio Code, and right inside our Visual Studio Code, I'm going to head over to uh, books. So right here slash books, which creates a new book. So I'm going to write a statement. So in this case, our statement, oh sorry for this. So statement here is going to be, so here we need to select our book. Actually, what we need is data that comes in from our API and from our client side. Get this data, create a new book object, and then save it to our database. So that's what exactly I'm doing. So right here, I'm going to first make use of, to first specify that we need the body that's going to be of type book. So I'll just come within our view function, and what I'll do is to specify the book and then just map it to a book. After doing this, we are going to create a new book object. So to do this, I'll say new book going to be equal to a book, and then I'll specify the various attributes that this book is going to have. It's going to have a title. This title is going to be book dot title. So basically, we are saying that the validated data from our serializer, which is going to be the title, and then we shall also specify the description. So yeah, we're going to say description. This is also going to be book dot description. So after doing this, I'm simply going to come and then save this to our database. So to do that, what I'll do is to actually say session dot add, then I'll add the new book, and then session dot commit. So this is basically enough to save our book to the database. And now what I'll need is to return a status code showing us whether our book has been created. So what I'm going to do is to come right here and say that we need our response model. So our response model in this case is going to be a book, and then what I'll do is to also specify that we need our status code as 201 created. So I'll say status code in this case is going to be status HTTP. So this will be 201 created. So let me first try to fix this so that you guys can clearly watch it. So right here we have our response model and our status code specified. So what I'm going to do is just return a new, just return our new and save. So right now we see that our server is reloading. Let's hope that everything is fine. Yeah, everything is fine. Going to head over to Insomnia and create a new request. This new request is going to be for creating a recipe. So be creating a recipe. So this is going to be a post method. Shall specify our body as JSON. So I'm going to specify the body as JSON. When I come here, I'll specify title. So in this case, we're going to say intro to FastAPI. And now we can also give a description. So it's going to be a description. That description in this case is going to be and so in this case, just call it the fundamentals. Let's say first API. So when I provide the URL, so this is going to be localhost. Sorry for this host 8000 slash this is going to be books. So when I post to this, I send. You now see that our book has been created and has an ID of 1. So right now we've been able to take care of one to create, one to get a book, and one to get all books. So let's go ahead and work on those for deleting and updating our books. We're going to come right in our VS Code within our main.py. So we're going to go to one for updating our book. So here also specify the body that you want to pass in our book. So I'm going to specify our body as a book. So I'll say book. Then I pass in our book schema. So what I'll do is first actually select this book from the database. I'm going to write a statement. This statement is going to be select, and then I'll select the book table, and I'll select where dot id is going to be equal to our book id. After doing this, I am going to basically execute this statement by saying so call it result is going to be equal to session exec. So this is going to be execute. Shall pass in the statement. After executing this, we want to get the result. So right here, what I'll do is to actually add. So in this case, we need the first one. So I'll add the first. And now after getting this result, what we need to do is to update this result. So right here, I'll say result dot. So in this case, I can specify the field that I want to update. So in this case, let's say we want to update the title. It's going to be equal to the data we get from the client. So in this case, it's going to be book dot title. And then I'll do the same for the description. Result dot. So this is going to be description. So this is going to be book dot description. After doing this, I'm going to come and simply save this to the database. So what I'll do is to say session dot commit. And after doing this, I'm going to basically return our updated object. So what I'll do is to say return our result. And then hoping that everything is working, I'm going to save. Everything is working. So I'm going to head over to Insomnia, create a new request. So this is going to be for updating our book. So this is going to be a put. Then I'm going to create it. So right in here, we need to specify our body as JSON. Going to be a JSON object containing a title. So let's say we're going to change it to intro to developing. So let's say developing REST API. Let's say Python. So in this case, if I say localhost, so 8000 slash book slash 1, since it's the only book we are having in our database for now. So if I send this, you see that now we see our body description is required, so we haven't provided a description. That's why we have these validation errors. Trying to do is to say description is going to be develop. So let's say develop REST APIs with Django and let's say fast API. So once I'm done with this and I send this request, so we see a description. So let's try to actually see what's wrong. So when I go this side, you see that it's supposed to be description. So let's try to see. This is going to be actually description. So I missed the S. Let's fix this. So when I try to send, now see that it has returned correct. It has been able to update our book, but it hasn't returned the correct response. So let's go ahead and fix that. So I'm going to come to our Visual Studio Code. What I'll do is to actually say that our response model is going to be equal to our schema. So save this. Our server is reloaded. We're going to go back to Insomnia, and when I send this request, in this case, we see that it has returned an updated resource. So let's go ahead and delete a book. So to delete a book, I'm going to query for a book, and if it does not exist, I shall return 404. If it exists, then we're going to delete it, returning a status code of 204. So the first thing I'm going to do is to come right in here and specify the status code. So the status code in this case is going to be status.http 204. So this is going to be no content. So right there, actually, I'm going to fix this. After fixing it, I'm going to come and create a statement that's going to select our book. So to do that, I'm going to come and say statement. Sorry for that. So this is going to be our statement. And the statement in this case is going to be, so in this case, the statement is going to be select from our book. So sorry for that. Going to be book, and where our book ID is equal to the ID. So I'll say book dot ID is equal to ID. So this is going to be our book ID. So after doing this, what we shall do is to just execute this statement. So I'll say result is going to be a session dot execute. Then I'll execute our statement. And after executing our statement, I'll basically say 1 on none. So in this case, let me use 1 on none. So unselect 1 or none if it doesn't exist. So right here, what I'll do is to just basically delete this and then be able to basically return a status code of 204, no content. So what I'll do is to just come and say session dot delete, and then here I'll delete the result. So before deleting the result, what I'll actually do is to throw an error if it doesn't exist. So to do that, we need to say if result is equal to none. That's when we don't find anything. We need to raise an HTTP exception. So this is going to be with a status code. So this status code is going to be status dot. So in this case, we're going to say HTTP 404 not found. So this case is going to be not found. And then we may also provide a detail. So right here, I may simply say that the detail, sorry for that, the detail is going to be, let's say, source not found. So after throwing this error, if in case it exists, we delete it, then we return. So in this case, we're just going to return a caps lock. Then send return. Then what I'll do is to say result. So hope that we don't have any errors if I save. our server is going to run. So let's try to actually work on this. What I'll do is to come to our insomnia. So right now we have only one. So what I'm going to do is to go to the create recipe route, then create a list of uh, a list of books. So right here, when I go to getting all books, you can see that we have many books. So we have in few books in our database right now. Actually, we have four of them. So after doing that, I'm going to come and create one for deleting. So I'm going to come to create a new request. So this is going to be for deleting a book. And I'm going to give it a method of delete. After doing this, I'll specify the URL. So in this case, I'm going to say localhost 8000 slash book slash, let's say, I want to delete one at ID 3. So when I send this, we see that it has deleted that book. So we have nothing returned and the status code of 204, no content. So let's say if I got all books and send, so before we had 4, so if I send, now actually have 3 of them. So in this video, we've been able to learn how to use SQL model, the fast API to work with our databases. Thank you for watching, guys. And if you like this video, please go ahead and leave a like, share this video, and also subscribe to the channel if you. Thank you for watching, guys. See you in the next video. Bye.